Can you see what's wrong with this scene? The trick is called forced perspective. It was used to shrink the hobbits in The Lord of the Rings. Deceptive framing has also created false assumptions about the EU, some very dark and some comical. This is the story of how a mythical EU dragon was conjured up and the striking truth behind it all. Headlines like these have been a reliable way for British newspapers to win attention. In 2015, the UN Human Rights Chief urged the UK to tackle tabloid hate speech after migrants were called cockroaches. The article in The Sun began, "Show me pictures of coffins, show me bodies floating in water, play violins, and show me skinny people looking sad. I still don't care."
You referred to a plague of feral humans. I mean, are they all feral? I mean, is it actually a plague?
It's because you look at them and think, you are nothing like me. You don't understand how our culture works. And these individuals from some of these cultures they come from are feral humans.
The UN described a nasty underbelly of racism and noted that Nazi media also referred to people as cockroaches, rats. Brexiteers sailed in on fears built up over decades. This campaign poster captures the deception. The migrants aren't heading to Britain and have no way to reach it. The lone white face has been covered by the campaign slogan. When challenged, Nigel Farage felt no pressure to apologise.
Your poster has been taken by many people as deeply offensive, upsetting, racist, anti-Muslim. Would you like to apologise to them tonight?
Well, you know, I issued a very similar poster to that 2 months before, with very little debate. The problem with the poster wasn't the image. After all, it appeared on all of our front page newspapers.
A leaflet played on the same fears, with more subtle deception. It claims these countries are set to join the EU. In reality, they have applied, but Turkey applied over 30 years ago and couldn't be further from joining. Syria and Iraq have not applied. They are shown for the fear factor. A second leaflet is less subtle. Turkey and Iraq are almost the same colour. The arrow, part of the visual language of invasion, includes all the colours of the region. Let's move the camera for a clearer view. This is what the NHS spends by age group. Add education and pensions, and we have half of all government spending. These are the demographics of immigrants. They are exactly what Britain needs to support its ageing population. There is overwhelming consensus among economists that immigration is good for Britain's economy. Studies show they boost public finances because they pay more in indirect taxes and make much less use of benefits and public services.
What do they know? What do they know of the impact of immigration on school places and hospital waiting lists?
In fact, immigrants pay for more places than they use. European migrants made a positive net contribution of £20 billion to UK public finances between 2000 and 2011. That's enough to pay for an extra 80 million GP visits per year. Immigrants also reduce waiting lists by easing the NHS's recruitment crisis. This year, the NHS has 3,000 fewer EEA nurses, and 4,000 doctors are considering leaving the UK. Here's the second graph. It shows that most Leave voters live in areas with very few immigrants. 9 of the 10 districts with the highest Leave vote had low immigration. Lambeth in London, which recorded the highest Remain vote of 78%, saw a net annual influx of 4,598 immigrants, while Castle Point in Essex saw only 81 new immigrants. But 72% of people there voted Leave. At first, this might seem surprising, but it's a well-established trend that when we meet immigrants, we lose our fear of them. The illusion is broken. The UK media is the least trusted in Europe by some margin. Perhaps even more readers need to recognise the deception before things improve. The Leave campaign also drove fear of losing democratic control.
We cannot hope to govern an independent nation. We cannot hope to have an independent democracy in this country as long as we are members of the EU.
Since 1999, the UK has voted in favour of EU laws 95% of the time and against only 2%. In search of an example of losing control to the EU, Boris suggested that the EU banned odd-shaped bananas, a myth debunked over 20 years ago.
You cannot sell bananas with abnormal curvature of the fingers.
Other comical myths hardly need debunking. In his resignation letter, Boris pointed to a more serious example. He said, "If a country cannot pass a law to save the lives of female cyclists, when that proposal is supported at every level of UK government, then I don't see how that country can truly be called independent." The laws he refers to were in fact put forward by the EU and passed despite some resistance among the UK government. Other EU achievements include taking sewage off bathing beaches, cheaper phone calls, fighting tax evasion by global companies, banning spam emails, and major breakthroughs in science and medicine through collaborative projects. But for Boris, the EU was like an alien force taking over Britain.
Let's fight against the great complacent, glutinous armies of the establishment. We can win. We can win on June the 23rd. Campaign between now and June the 23rd. Take back control of our country. Vote Leave, and let's make sure that June the 24th is Independence Day.
The framing of Boris and his colleague Jacob Rees-Mogg as fighting the establishment was also very forced. Jacob's father was the editor of the Times. In his own words, he was effectively born into the establishment. He is for fox hunting, against abortion under any circumstances, and personally delivered a Daily Express petition against foreign aid. But the message resonated with people who had suffered years of income stagnation while the rich had grown richer. The Leave campaign blamed this on immigration. But studies show immigration does not deflate wages, and the real causes are well established. The 2008 financial crisis and government policies criticised by the UN as failing to promote social mobility. People without degrees, perhaps feeling trapped at the wrong end of income inequality, were far more likely to vote Leave. Central London is the EU's richest region, and yet 30% of UK children live in poverty. 100,000 more have fallen below the poverty line in 12 months. Boris and co seem unlikely candidates to deviate from this path. Projecting a fight against the establishment allowed the Leave campaign to brush research, data and expert advice under the carpet.
What economics body is there that they should believe?
All the ones that are part of the sort of institutional infrastructure of big government, be suspicious of.
I think the people in this country have had enough of experts with organisations from acronyms.
People of this country have had enough of experts.
From organisations with.
In a poll of top economists, 80% agreed that people in the UK would be poorer as a result of Brexit. Only 2% disagreed. Here's why there's such a consensus.
Putting up trade barriers is bad for your economy. The withdrawal from the EU is a form of putting up trade barriers. Full stop. You are ruining your competitiveness specifically with your largest trading partner. It is a fact of life. It's one of the few things in economics we can talk about as a fact of life. The gravity applies.
The UK trades more with Ireland than with China. Yet Jacob Rees-Mogg says a no-deal Brexit would boost the economy by £1.1 trillion. Trump has, of course, employed a similar trick, branding the whole mainstream media as fake and projecting his own alternative facts. Perhaps the Leave campaign's greatest trick, after dishonestly sowing and stoking so much groundless fear themselves, was to steal from that cheap Trump playbook and accuse Remainers of being guilty of their crimes. Just as Trump, the master creator of false facts, shouts fake news at whatever goes against his agenda, so the Brexiteers, the arch-instigators of electoral fear themselves, routinely labelled all the warnings from experts Project Fear. Expert warnings which have come starkly true throughout this shambles of a negotiation period.
Project Fear.
Project Fear. Project Fear.
The truth is beginning to outshine the mythical dragon of the EU. Polls show that most people would now rather remain in Europe, and there is increasing support for a vote on the final deal, something Jacob Rees-Mogg once supported.
And you could have two referendums, and as it happens, it may be more sense to have the second referendum after the renegotiation is completed.
Should the will of the people change when they have clearly put their deal before them, would he respect that will of the people?
If in 30 years' time the UK wants to rejoin, that would be a matter for the electorate then. But this result must be respected and it must be implemented.
Perhaps in a final vote, facts would start to overcome fears. Wouldn't that be a win for informed democracy?